Hey there, math magicians. This is going to be your last lesson for Unit 9. So here we go. We have one more thing to learn. So let's jot down some notes. Alright, let's title it Notes. It's going to be lesson 9.4. That will match up with the lesson in your textbook if you have to look something up. And the topic is solving quadratic equations. Solving quadratic equations, which, by the way, we've been doing for this entire unit. But we're going to be solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. Alright, so we haven't learned the quadratic formula yet, or at least I haven't taught it to you yet. Some of you may already know it. So here we go. Now, before we learn the quadratic formula, I think we should take a minute to just kind of review the other methods. So the first thing we're going to do is just talk about the 5 methods. The 5 methods for solving quadratic equations. Okay, so these are equations that are ax squared plus bx plus c. Alright, the first method we actually learned back in Unit 7, and that's factoring. And factoring is a great method if it's easily factored. So if you can quickly and easily factor it, then go for it. Okay? And sometimes you can just look at a problem and go, oh my gosh, I can factor that. So go for it. Factor it, and then use the zero product property to find x. Now remember, factoring is looking for a GCF, seeing if there's a difference of perfect squares. Let's see, let me try to write a little neater here. Difference of perfect squares. There are trinomials. Some of them are easy. Some of them require the British method, and then there's grouping. Okay? All right, the next method we learned was graphing. That's probably my least favorite because it's the most time consuming if I do it by hand. But what's really great about factoring is it gives you a visual image. So you can actually see the meaning behind finding the x. It's actually the x-intercepts. And that helps. And you know what? I'm not going to let you use Desmos on your test, but later on you could use Desmos. And that's a really quick, easy way to graph. And then you could get the visual. All right, the third method is using the square roots. So the third method is square roots. Now that one only works if the quadratic equation is of this form, ax squared plus c equals 0. It does not have the bx. Okay? It doesn't have the linear part. All right, the fourth method, we just learned this one, is completing the square. It's kind of a handy-dandy little method, a little bit time-consuming. Completing the square, not too tough, but for completing the square, it has to have a leading coefficient of 1. So it's going to be 1x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So you need a leading coefficient of 1. All right, and then finally, we're on our fifth method, the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula will work for any quadratic. So it works for all of them. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. All right, so that's why sometimes it's people's favorite. All right, I'm going to explain where the quadratic formula comes from. You do not have to copy this next part, but I think you should watch it. Okay, so here we go. Here is the quadratic formula. And I'm going to go kind of quickly, and all you have to do is watch this part and listen. You do not have to write all of this. Alright, so it works for any quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c. You can write it if you want, by the way, but you don't have to. Alright, we're going to start by completing the square, so we're going to move the c to the other side. Ax squared plus bx equals negative c, right? Because you'd have to subtract it. Now we can't use completing the square unless it has a leading coefficient of 1, so we're going to divide every term by a. So that turns into a 1. So you'll have x squared plus b over a times x equals negative c over a. Okay, now when you complete the square, you take half of this. So if you take half of that, that means you'd multiply by a half. So half of it means a half times it, and then you'd square it. So you'd take half times that, which would be b over 2a, and then you'd square that. And that has to be added to both sides. b over 2a quantity squared. If you're not following this totally, that's all right. Just hang in there. Keep watching. Do the best you can. Okay, so let's see here. Over here, I'm going to square it, and I'm going to square it. So that's going to give me x squared plus b over a times x plus b squared over 4a squared equals negative c over a plus b squared over 4a squared. Alright, now over here I'm going to add these, but I need a common denominator. And the common denominator would be 4a squared. So I have to multiply this by 4a over 4a. Alright, I'm going to write all this, x squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a squared equals, alright, I'm going to multiply this by 4a over 4a. So that'll be negative 4ac over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. Alright, so now I have a common denominator, so I can add this. And I'm going to factor this side. Now I know this is a trinomial square because I used completing the square, so I know this is a trinomial square. So this is going to factor into x plus b over 2a quantity squared. And over here when I add, I'll have, let's see, I'm going to put, since I have a common denominator, I'm going to put the b squared first, the positive b squared first, then the minus 4ac. So b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Okay, now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And that will give me x plus b over 2a. Whoops, I don't want blue. Oh well. X plus b over 2a equals, on this one I'll have plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over, and the square root of 4a squared is 2a. And we're almost done. We're going to subtract this b over 2a from both sides. So I'll subtract b over 2a, and I'll subtract b over 2a. And the quadratic formula is x equals, I'm going to put this first. Now they have a common denominator, so that's good. I'm going to put this first. I'm going to put the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the quadratic formula right there. So you definitely should write that down. Okay? X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of this whole thing, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright? Watch the next video and I'll explain how to actually use the quadratic formula.